I'm so glad you're here. I'm Kate Champion. I'm an author, therapist, and generally curious human whose life has been full of ups and downs, twists and turns, mess and adventures, some intentional and some not so much. Welcome to Living Big Mindfully, a later in life podcast. Here are 3 questions for you. Are you ready? Are you in midlife or beyond? Or maybe struggling with next steps or finding your feet? Possibly feeling like something's missing, not quite right with your life? Or maybe you have a sense that you're really not living your own truth. Okay, you're right, that was way more than 3 questions. But were there any yes answers? Yeah? Okay, fantastic. That means that you are in the right place and this is the show for you. So grab a seat, get comfy, and join us for inspiring, heartfelt conversations. Conversations with real people just like you and me. Listen in as we chat about life, love, health, healing, and thriving well into our later years. And let's commit to creating honest, fulfilling lives and giving a high five to living big mindfully. One more thing. Make sure you visit katechampionauthor.com. Check out Never Too Late and You Are Limitless, my best-selling books. And while you're there, be sure to download your free hiking guide. And remember, check out our Living Big Mindfully community on Facebook. And please share your favorite episode with your friends. Thank you so much. Okay, that is enough for me. Are you ready? Great. Then let's dive in. Are you struggling with mess, clutter, and feeling overwhelmed? Then this week's episode of Living Big Mindfully is a must listen. We're exploring autism, ADHD, organizational habits, and learning how we can begin to collaborate with the spaces we live in. Alyssa is a neuro-divergent woman and she's a professional home organizer. And she's sharing her first-hand experience and serving up some of her wisdom, tips, and strategies. In this fun, fast-paced conversation, you'll learn about how you can begin to see the mess and clutter from a different perspective, how our environments can begin to support us rather than work against us, and how we can begin to organize our homes in a more intuitive way. And what if you live with a loved one with ADHD? Yep, that's a thing in my life, and we cover that too. We definitely have a few laughs here. Then Alyssa gives us some simple, non-judgmental questions we can begin to ask ourselves, some practical strategies with some real-life examples to help us get started. Of course, Alyssa wraps up with some helpful sage advice. And please make sure you check out the show notes this week for a ton of helpful resources, including a free workbook that focuses on the kitchen. All right, let's get on with the show. Hello, I am talking to Alyssa today, and I am really excited about connecting. I have to tell you, she's been so flexible. I've been like nuts with my schedule, but she's been so flexible and adjusting. So I thank you and welcome. Tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what you're bringing to the table today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. So I am Alyssa, and I run a business called Alyssa's Yellow House. And what I sort of do there is work in the home organization space, specifically with mostly people who are neurodivergent or have really struggled with sort of conventional organizing. So I completely understand having some chaos in your life. I personally have autism and ADHD, so I have plenty of my own chaos. Some of it is self-generated. And yeah, that's really kind of how I got into this space. So I'm really very passionate about it.
Yeah, that's so funny. We were in the pre-chat, we were talking about that combination of kind of ADHD and autism. I was sharing that, I'm also a therapist, and in my practice, I serve a lot of women, 40, 45, and they're just now getting the ADHD diagnosis. I mean, they've struggled for a long time. Why can't I get this done? Why can't I remember the meds? Why can't I get little Johnny's lunch done? Blah, blah, blah. And they're now taking their kids because they've been identified by the teacher. They're taking their kids for testing. And the doctors are saying, well, have you ever thought that you might have some ADHD? And they have gone in and got the testing done. And of course, they're checking all the boxes. And like these light bulbs have gone off, right? So, oh my gosh, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not crazy. I'm not lazy. I'm not, all these things. It's just this ADHD thing. And it's like their worlds have opened up. And I wonder what your journey was like, because you were diagnosed a little later as well. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was in a similar situation. I had a very good friend who came to me and told me that she had been diagnosed and then said, basically, it turns out that a lot of the things we have in common are actually symptoms. So maybe I should talk to someone about that and see kind of what was going on. And for me, this was kind of at the very beginning of when, the whole world sort of shut down. And so I was having this happen as I was spending a lot of time at home. So it was a big relief to me to find out that, like you were saying, I'm not crazy, I'm not lazy. There's a good reason why these things that socially we're kind of conditioned to believe that, especially for women, a lot of these tasks around the home are supposed to be really easy. They're supposed to come naturally to us, and they didn't come naturally to me. I struggled, and I thought I was the only one. And then I found that I had ADHD, and I thought, okay, this is why all of these advice, all these techniques have not worked for me. Because, I mean, what do you hear every single time you open a book or watch a show about home organization? The first thing they say is, well, just make it a habit, which works great unless you have ADHD and you don't form habits easily. So it was like, it was this huge light bulb moment of, I can't do it that way, but that doesn't mean I can't do it.
Oh, I love that. So I'm going to pause here for a second, because that right there is really powerful. And I would like you and listeners to hear that. Say that last sentence again.
It's not that I can't do it. I just can't do it like that.
That's right. That's right. That is so powerful. So powerful. How have you learned to kind of adjust and adapt and work within your environment to make it comfortable for a neurodivergent brain? Tell me about that. How have you done that?
So a lot of it has been a process of replacing habits with routines. Because
tell me more about that. What does that look like?
Yes. So a habit, if you look up the definition of a habit is something that you basically spontaneously remember to do. I was absolutely flabbergasted the first time I found out that there are people who don't have to remind themselves to brush their teeth twice a day.
Wow.
Like, that is a task for me to remember. And I do it because I've created systems and routines that remind me, but I can't rely on my brain to spontaneously remember to do that. And that's something I've known about myself for a long time. So I just started applying that same idea to the other areas of my life. So, if it's after dinner time and I've walked out of the kitchen, if I'm not seeing the dishes on the counter, I forget that they're there. Unless I have a system to remind me that I need to go back and I need to take care of that. And oh, by the way, while I'm there, I need to check all these other things to make sure those things have been done. Because if I am relying on myself to just remember, it won't happen. And then I criticize, I get stuck in that cycle that I think we're all familiar with, where you forget something somewhere And then you're telling yourself, oh, how could I have forgotten this? Why can't I do a better job? And then you're stressed out. And because you're stressed out, you start dropping balls in other places. And then you just feel worse and worse and worse. But like if criticizing yourself was going to solve the problem, that would have worked by now.
Yeah. Yeah. And frankly, that's a really painful cycle, right? Because it's this habit loop of really kind of like almost self-hate, right? You just get into the cycle of, why can't I do this? Why am I so defective? Why can't everybody else do it? I'm a loser. I suck. And that's such a painful habit or cycle to go over and over and over. And remember, that cycle has probably been going on since childhood, right? That cycle started in school and just kind of really got ingrained. So I'm so thankful that you were kind of pointing out that cycle. Yeah.
It's hard. And it's especially hard when we start seeing our kids do the same thing.
So
and we know what it's like. So
tell me more, because my children, they have other issues, but ADHD isn't one of them. So tell me about that, how it is for a mom with kids, and tell me about that, because I have listeners with kids and also listeners with grandkids. So tell me more about that.
Yeah. So kids are so impressionable, and these social messages that we have about which things get to be easy and which things get to be hard is really pervasive. And math gets to be hard, but keeping your school desk neat should be easy. And we sort of set kids up to internalize these messages. And as a parent, as a teacher, as someone who's interacting with kids, especially neurodivergent children who maybe do struggle a little more with keeping all of their stuff organized, you start to notice that they're not just disorganized. Like I think we've all either been or we've met the child where if you say, hey, do you have a paper clip? They're like, oh yeah, if you go over in that pile in the corner and you dig underneath the sports hoodie, there's like a shoebox. And inside the shoebox, there's like a green frog stapler. And if you look under that, there's like a card, like a box of playing cards, and there's 2 paper clips stuck in that box. And you're going, how do you know that? Why can you remember that, but you can't pick that pile up off the floor?
Right.
Well, there's a really good reason that you can't pick that pile up off the floor. And it's because of this cycle where there's not an easy place to put it, or the place where it's supposed to go doesn't feel intuitive, it doesn't feel natural, or it's hard to get to. There's some kind of a barrier. It's either a physical barrier or it's an emotional barrier to putting things away. So then you put them in the pile. Well, now they live in the pile. So you know where they are in the pile the same way that you would know where they are in the cabinet. It's just that no one else can find them when they're in the pile.
Yeah. And mom or grandma or grandpa is grumbling, got me wrong, and you're such a mess. And, what's this big pile here? Let's get this sorted out, right?
Right. And it's the same kids who are told your room is such a mess. Why can't you clean it up? Why can't you do this? That grow up and then don't know how. So then their homes feel overwhelming because now they're not just supposed to be responsible for their room. They're responsible for, the entire house, the entire apartment. And that's a lot more space, but they still don't have those skills. And they're still trying to use someone else's organizational method that isn't working for them. And it's interesting to me because everyone is familiar with trying to use an organizational method that doesn't work for them. I mean, if you're in high school.
Give me an example. I'm kind of fascinated. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah.
Give me an example.
So if you're in high school and your mom comes in and cleans your room, you can't find anything. I mean, how many of us remember going, oh my gosh, mom, why did you do that? Now I'm never going to find all my stuff. And she's like, well, it's more organized now. And sure it is, but it's not organized in the way that you know it and the way that you understand it and feels intuitive for you. Or how many of us have had, their mother-in-law or, a relative come over and help them move, and they're putting things away in places that you're going, why would you put that here? But then somehow when we have our own homes to take care of, it's like we lose that certainty that we had as teenagers, that your organizational system is not necessarily right for me. And it seems like there's just one way to do it. And if you're not doing it that way, then it must be wrong.
Yeah. And if that's wrong, then I'm wrong, right? Then
right.
That's where the personalization comes in. Then the internalization, especially as a kid, then I'm wrong. I'm doing it wrong. What's wrong with me? That's where it gets really difficult.
Right.
Like confidence and self-esteem and yeah.
And when our kids are in school, especially the younger grades in elementary school, preschool, like when they're struggling, we don't look at them and say, wow, you're a broken kid. I wonder why you're so pathetic that you can't do your job. We look at them and say, what do you need in your environment? What are we not providing you with that is setting you up for success? But somehow, as soon as we hit middle school, high school, college, adulthood, we're looking at ourselves going, wow, you're so pathetic that you can't do this. And we've stopped asking ourselves, what environment are we in? And is our environment setting us up for success?
Yeah, I love that question. And what do I need? Like, what are stopping for that moment and like asking, okay, this isn't working for me. What do I need? Versus just feeling like you're a screw up, right? Because you, quotes, can't get it right, right?
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, you have the ability as an adult to control a lot of your environment, which means that if you pay attention to the things that really work for you and the things that feel intuitive for you, you can set up your space so that your environment supports you instead of spending all of your time trying to support an environment that's not giving you anything back.
Wow, I love that. So I'm going to pause. So say that sentence again about the environment supporting you. Say that again. I want listeners to really hear this.
When you have control of your space and you can focus on figuring out what really feels good and intuitive for you, you can create a space that is supporting you instead of you spending all of your time supporting your space.
I love that. I love that. So can you give me some examples? What might that look like? Kind of in a practical way. How can we make our environments support us? So give us some tools and strategies.
Yeah. So one of my favorite examples of this in my own home is when I bring in the mail. There's so much junk mail, that flyers, things that I don't need. Well, my recycling bin is all the way across the house at the back of my kitchen by the kitchen door. I have found I am not going to take those things immediately in the front door from the mailbox and walk all the way through the house with them to the back door. So what I did was I just put a little bin on the table beside the front door, and that's my recycling mail catch-all bin, and I throw things in there until it's full. And then I can take that whole bin of things all at once back to the recycling when that bin gets full. Because otherwise, before I put a little basket there, I would just throw it on the same table in the same spot. But there was no internal signal for me that I looked at and said, oh, now it's time to take those things to the recycling and make one trip and do the whole thing at once. So it would just build up and pile and pile and pile until it all fell over on the floor. And then I was back in the loop of, wow, why can't I get this right? Why am I like this? Where now I don't have to have that internal conversation. I dump it in the bin because that's where it goes. And then when I see that the bin has gotten full, it hits that mental trigger for me that reminds me, hey, you need to do this. And then it's a 3-minute task instead of spending ages beating myself up for not doing something. Like if I was going to start doing it, I always go back to, if beating myself up was going to get me to start doing it, it would have worked. and it hasn't,
So that,
which means
yeah.
I
So
need
that's
to do something else.
yeah. So that's a signal, right? If you find yourself, if listeners find themselves thinking that, or their middle schooler or their teens or their grandchild is thinking that, then that might be a signal to really look at the environment, right? It's like what do I
Yes.
need here to make the environment function for me?
Yes, especially in organizing, I find that complaints are the first indicator that something in the environment is struggling.
I'm laughing because I think my husband has some ADHD, undiagnosed. And we literally have this room in our house. I call it the messy room. And that's kind of my husband's room. And it looks like, so there's definitely an indicator because I'm complaining, right? So my complaints about my loved one, it's time to pick up that room. That messy room's getting really out of control. So that's probably a sign, right, that this is not working. And you're right, it's not working.
Yeah, exactly. And being able to look at it and say, like you just said, I love the way you just phrased that, where you said, this is not working. You're not saying, wow, why can't you clean up this mess? It's, what is it about this room that is not making it easy to put things back where they go? Because there are some things that even people who are thinking to themselves, but I can never put anything back where it goes, I'm always just laying things down. That's really not true. And I have the perfect example to prove it, and it's toilet paper. You are never wandering around your house like, where did I leave the toilet paper? And like finding it in the microwave. Nope, it is always in the same spot because it's clearly intuitive to keep it there. That's where you're using it. That's where you need it. And that's where you find it every time.
In all my years living with my husband, I've never found the toilet paper in the microwave. That's so true. Yeah.
Right. It's a very intuitive place to put it. And so we put it there without thinking. You don't find yourself moving into a new place and thinking, oh my gosh, where am I going to organize and put this toilet paper? Well, it's pretty obvious where it's going to go.
Yeah, I love that. What else do you think is important in this conversation? What else do you feel like you'd like to share? What do you want listeners to know about kind of unconventional home organization?
Yeah, so the goal of home organization from a lot of, books and magazines is that it should look nice. And if your only goal is for it to look nice, it is unlikely that it will be functional. But if your goal is for it to be functional, it is likely that it will also look nice. Because you'll be using it. You'll be using it properly. You'll be putting things away where they go instead of where they are, quote unquote, supposed to go. I mean, we've all done it. We've all laid down the hairdryer or something on the counter and thought, I'll put that away later. I don't have time right now. Well, if it was in an easy place, we would just put it away. We don't have to think about things like putting the toothbrush back in the toothbrush holder. We're never like, oh, I don't have time to put my toothbrush back in the holder. It just goes there. Or I don't have time to put the dish soap back next to the sink. It's an easy place to put it that feels intuitive. And so it doesn't kind of infringe on our thought process as we're going through our day.
Got it. So let's say I invite you as a home organizer and I invite you into my home and, you take a room, maybe a kid's room, like a teenager's room, and, it's just a mess and stuff everywhere. How might you start and how might you coach somebody through getting some of these kind of routines and you using their intuition for organizing? How might you coach somebody through that?
Yeah. So the first thing that I would do is really talk to that person and ask them to get really specific about what the problems are. Because we have a tendency to say really general complaints that are not actually very helpful in figuring out what we can fix. So we might say like, oh, I hate cooking. Well, I mean, standing over the stove and stirring a pan is not that difficult. So let's look at what it actually is. Do is the problem really that, it's at the wrong height and you get low back pain when you stand here?
Okay.
Or is the problem that, it's the floor is always got crumbs on it and you're standing here being irritated about all the crumbs on the floor? Or is the problem that you don't have enough cleared off counter space to work in? So you're playing Tetris with your ingredients, trying to make things go. Like, if you can get really specific about what the problem actually is, it's so much easier to manage. So with that teenager's bedroom, if you could ask them, like, what is the hard part? Where do you find the most difficulty in putting things back? And, maybe it's, oh, well, I wore this hoodie today and it's not really dirty, but it's not really clean. So I feel weird putting it back in the closet, but I also don't want to put it in the hamper. So instead I'm going to drop it on the floor. And then you can start looking at, okay, so can we designate an area of the closet for these are things that have been worn once or twice? Or get another, like a basket or some kind of easily reachable organizational strategy for, okay, these are the things that have been worn once or twice, but you don't really easily connect them to, those are the places the laundry goes, right? It goes with the clean clothes or it goes with the dirty clothes. So if you have this middle category, it just goes on the floor unless you have a space to put that middle category.
Got it. Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking actually about my son's room. We've got a lot of hooks, right? So he can hang things off the floor that don't go in the wardrobe. He can just hang hooks are great. At least that seems to work in our house. Yeah. So we've kind of done a lot of hooks and things. That seems to be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great solution for that type of a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And we came up, we just kind of came up with that, like, it was a mistake. It was an accident, right? I was just so frustrated by the mess in the closet, and we just put some hooks in and blah, blah, blah. And it seemed to work. So we came across that completely by accident. So do you suggest people kind of play and practice, or do you suggest they hire like a home organization person or go on YouTube, or how do you get some of these skills?
So the one thing I would say about hiring someone is that I'm not against hiring someone to come into your home and do your organizing, but I would be very careful because you want a system that you can maintain. You don't want to be paying that person to come back every week and put things away. You want someone who's going to really work with you to figure out what are the systems that are going to be easily maintainable for you and for your kids and for your family, because that won't look the same for everyone. So you don't want someone whose organizational system doesn't match the way that it works for you.
Right. So let's go back to that intuition thing, right? That kind of intuition, like checking in with yourself. What do I really need here? What does this room really need? And like, for example, if I was working with my husband on his messy room, like maybe that's a conversation about, okay, this isn't working. What do we need? What would really work? What do you feel like would work for you, right? With this pile and that pile and all the rest of it.
Yes. And the other thing I would say is working through it yourself is completely possible. And it's easiest to start small, because we convince ourselves that if we want big change, we have to take big action. But a lot of the time we don't. We can change little things that, I use the sort of metaphor of like, if you wake up every day with a kiddie pool full of energy and you're dipping out of it every time you do something, it doesn't matter if you're using like a sandcastle bucket or if you're using one of those little tiny medicine cups. It's still costing you energy. But we notice when we dip a whole sandcastle bucket worth of energy out of our day, when we're doing those big things, we don't tend to notice when we're spending those little tiny cups of energy until we look back at the end of the day and go, oh my gosh, it's dinner time and I am out. I have no more energy. because you've spent all of it on these tiny little death by 1,000 paper cuts issues. So if you can solve those things, you can make so much more progress towards something else. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as there's this piece of furniture that just kind of blocks the closet door. So I don't put things back in the closet because it's a pain to open the door. Okay, well, can you shove that dresser a couple of inches over or replace it with something that's a little bit skinnier so that the door opens easily? And now you've removed that barrier. You didn't have to rebuild your whole closet or throw out all your stuff. You just need to figure out what is actually the problem and then solve the small problems first.
Yeah, I love that. I love that language too, kind of looking for the barriers and kind of seeing if there are ways to move or change those barriers, eliminate the barriers. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And to recognize that the way that you did it before is not necessarily the way that's going to work for you now. As you change, as your needs change, as your abilities change, things are going to evolve, and it's okay to let that system evolve with you and to acknowledge that even if something worked really well for a really long time, it's okay to do it differently if it's not giving you that same sense of success that it was in the past.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about our organizational structures evolving with us as we kind of develop over the lifespan. I hadn't really thought about that, but I think there's really some truth to that. That's pretty wise. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I certainly at 60 don't organize like the way I did when I was 16, right? There's been a big change, a big shift. So there's hope.
Yeah, and our priorities are changing, and also, I mean, our physical abilities are changing, because whether we have a diagnosed disability or not, you know, everybody is going to develop that knee that twinges when it's about to rain, or you know, the low back that hurts when you stand at the sink too long. Just in the process of aging, this happens. And recognizing that it's not a failure to accommodate yourself. If you want to grab a chair or put a bar stool at your stove, go for it. No one is stopping you. Yeah. The only person standing in the way of you being as comfortable as you can be is you. And if you're uncomfortable, then whatever it is that you're doing is automatically going to be more distasteful to you, because most people are not excited. I mean, maybe like some extreme sports people, I am not into extreme sports, so I don't know, but some of those, especially like rock climbers and, you know, marathon runners, like maybe those people are really excited to be in situations that feel physically uncomfortable. But I'm not excited to stand at the stove and make mac and cheese and hurt. If it's hurting me, I don't want to be there. I don't want to be doing it. Yeah. So taking steps that make you more comfortable physically will also make you more comfortable emotionally. Yeah.
Yeah. And that, you know, I'm thinking about my bedroom right now, because that's one space I can kind of control. And it's usually when I'm in there, it's comfortable because things are where they should be. It's kind of minimalistic, you know. There's not a lot of clutter. So when I go into that space, it feels pretty comfortable. So yeah, I get that sense of, you know, feeling comfortable in the body or feeling uncomfortable in the body. And again, I hate to pick on my husband when I go into the messy room. It's like my body just feels like, right? It feels really, really uncomfortable. Yeah, those spaces do have different energies for sure.
Yeah. The phrase that my mom likes to use, that she's used since I was tiny, is that it's breathing my air. And that's how it feels. It feels when your space is disorganized, it feels like it's breathing your air. It's taking your energy just to deal with it. It's taking energy to ignore it or to work around it. Yeah. And the things that you notice yourself ignoring and working around are the perfect place to start fixing things, because those are going to be those really exciting wins that give you the energy to keep moving.
I love that. Right. So if I was to ask you where to start with where you're feeling annoyed or uncomfortable or frustrated or irritated or like,
yes.
Start there. Okay.
Yeah. Then you're eliminating some of those little tiny medicine cup drips of energy.
Got it.
Because you're not spending that extra energy. I mean, anyone who has spent time around kids knows that when you're listening to the mom, 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 it takes a lot of energy to ignore that.
Yeah.
And it takes the same amount of energy to ignore other things in our environment that are stressing us out. So when you fix those things and change them so they're not stressing you out anymore, which is going to be very individual to each person, and maybe it's just putting it away in a different place, or maybe it's getting a chair, or maybe it's, taking another step that makes it feel more comfortable and intuitive for you, you get that energy back.
I see. Okay. So eliminating some of these irky spots actually makes you feel better, and you get more energy back to do other more satisfying things, like going for that walk or playing with the kids or whatever that might be.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the experience of not being able to relax because you're thinking about that next distasteful task you have to do is the same as not being able to relax because you're ignoring that thing and you're telling yourself, I should be picking that up. I should be cleaning that up. I should be organizing that pile. And you're not doing it because you can't. There is an emotional or a physical barrier, or you would have already done it. But now you're still not resting. You're still not relaxing. You're still not really enjoying spending time in your space because all your time is being taken up by thinking about the task that you're not doing and blaming yourself for not doing it.
Right. And creating all that kind of icky energy, right? Which is so exhausting, right? It's just so exhausting to live on that hamster wheel. Like, yeah.
Yes. So, and when you start reorganizing things in a way that feels really good for you, and, I love Marie Kondo. I think that she's so smart. I love her organization method. It does not work for me. I'm so happy that it works for her. It doesn't work for me. And if I were to try to organize my home that way, I would feel so stressed out every time I had to walk back into my house.
Okay.
But because I'm not, because it's organized for me, it feels comfortable. It feels intuitive. I would never ask another woman to organize my purse. And I would never ask another woman where I should put things in my home because she doesn't know how I'm going to use them or where I'm going to look for them.
Yeah. It's like I would never ask another person to organize my underwear and bra drawer, right? Because A, it's so personal, but B, it's like that's your stuff, right? And you just have a method, you have a system, you have a way that you want it to be. Yeah. Right. So I need kind of other kind of tips and strategies that might be helpful for listeners as we kind of wrap up this conversation. Any last kind of tips and strategies that might be helpful?
Sure. Yeah. So my favorite kind of way of working through this method is to start out looking at your mindset, which we've, talked a lot about. Look at what is frustrating you. How are you thinking about it? How are you talking to yourself about it? How can you switch that to put the focus on the environment instead of on you? And then start fixing that. The second piece is the physical organization of the space, which is where do you put things? How is it organized? Is it easy to get to? Is it within your physical ability to get to? Is it easy for other people in your family to get to so that when somebody gets up at 2 a.m. and really needs a Tylenol, they don't have to come wake you up to get it for them?
That's a great point. Yeah.
And then the third piece is the methods, which is the sort of the component of how you and your space interact. Because organization is really a conversation that you are having with your space. And when it's good, you're both supporting each other.
Yeah. So I love that. I'm going to say that again. So organization is the conversation between you and your space. Wow. I love that. Yeah.
So, for a long time, I felt like the conversation between me and my space was a big argument all the time, and it was hopeless, and I was never going to win this argument. And then when I found out why I was struggling so much, I realized, hang on, we're on the same side. We're both struggling. I'm struggling and my space is struggling. Neither of us are winning. It's not, we're not really pitted against each other. It just feels that way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think in some ways you are, right? People are pitted against each other between us and the space, because there's not a collaboration, right? There's not a synergy. There's not a harmony, right? There's not a flow.
Yes.
Yeah. So it does feel like resistance, like bam, bam, bam.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if you and your space are trying to help each other, when there's that disconnect, it's just not working.
Mm.
And going home feels like dealing with a screaming toddler in the grocery store, because you just know there's no way to win this argument. There's nothing you can say that's going to be persuasive. So the only way to fix it is to change the way that conversation works, which means doing the work of figuring out where in your mindset or your organization is not supporting the method that you want for the way that you function in your space.
Right. And that question, right, taking that moment to say, okay, what do I really need here? Right? What's going to work for me here? What makes sense for me here? Yeah, that's powerful.
It really is. And it takes looking at it that way as a collaboration between you and your space removes that component of shame that so many of us feel about everybody else is good at this except for me. Well, everybody else is not living in your space.
Oh my, you just hit something on the head, this house shame thing, right? I've had to work a lot on the house shame, but it does, like mess or clutter, or, I'm the worst housekeeper. So, God, dust bunnies here and there and all the rest of it. But yeah, just, it does. You're right. It takes away that kind of horrible house shame that people feel.
Yeah. And when it's a conversation between you and your space and it's going well, you don't have to feel that sense of foreboding when someone says, hey, I'm going to come over. You don't have to run through your house frantically shoving things behind cabinet doors and hoping that they don't open it so they don't see how you really live, because it just doesn't feel that way. It works. It flows easily.
Yeah, I love that. I think we could have a whole nother conversation about that shame thing, for sure. A whole nother episode. So I asked guests this question: what's your one piece of sage advice you might share with listeners as we wrap up today?
I would say honor your evolving self. If your mother-in-law came in and rearranged your kitchen, you would not feel bad at all about moving it back to how it works for you, even if she had good intentions. And you can really think about your past self the same way. Trust that you meant well. You were doing what worked for you at the time. But also, your past self doesn't have to live here anymore. You do. So create the space that works for you and the life that you're living right now.
Oh my gosh, I feel so touched by that. Thank you. I mean, that is really beautiful and powerful. It just gives us so much permission, right? So much permission to open and accept, and it's almost loving, right? Loving ourselves and our messiness.
Yeah, I mean, we are living in our space rather than our space living in us.
Yeah.
So giving yourself that permission to live there and to make it the way that you want it to be. Even if, I mean, I was talking to someone once who was saying that their children for a while stored blocks in one of their kitchen cabinets because they wanted to be in the kitchen with mom and they wanted to be taking things out of the cabinet. She got tired of it being her pots and pans, so she put blocks in the kitchen cabinet. It doesn't matter. You can store blocks in your cabinet if that's what you want to do. It's your cabinet. Nobody is coming into your house and telling you that you're wrong for the way that you're storing your stuff. And if they are, who cares? Because they don't live here.
Right. That's beautiful. It's a lovely solution, right? It works for her, works for the kids. It's a win-win.
Yeah. I mean, any solution that works for you is the solution that works for you. And whether it works for someone else doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter whether it's in House and Gardens or whatever, right? It doesn't matter, or Martha Stewart or whoever, right? It's what works for you. That's really
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No one from a magazine is coming to take pictures of my home. But my family, even my extended family, when they come in, they have said to me, it just feels so calm in here. It feels like a nice place to be. I just want to sit on the couch and just sink in and be here. And that's really easy to do because it's not, I haven't set it up so that I'm fighting my space. And it doesn't matter to me whether Better Homes and Gardens is coming to photograph my living room because I feel good in it. So even if it looks a little chaotic sometimes, it feels good. And that's what matters to me more than anything.
It's really lovely. And it's also, there's you're not measuring yourself against outside expectations, right? You're not measuring yourself about these outside bars, right? It's got to be like this, it's got to be like that. But you're really being true to yourself and what your family needs.
Yes, and that's such a powerful way of saying it, that it's being true to you and what you need and what your family needs. Because in no other area would we let someone tell us what our family needed.
That's a great point.
But somehow with home organization, we have all these messages coming in and we internalize them, and then we feel like we are failing ourselves and our families if we're not doing it the way that the magazine on the spinner rack at the checkout said we should be doing it. And you wouldn't let the writer of the magazine parent your children, so why are you letting them make you feel bad about how your home is when they don't live there? You and your kids do.
That's powerfully said and very true. I really want listeners to hear that, right? Yeah, that's really true. It's really powerfully said. So well done. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So where can listeners find more out about you in your home organizational services and skills? Where can people connect with you, Alyssa?
Yeah, so my website, alyssasyellowhouse.com, it's ALYSSA, is a great place. I have tons of content on there, lots of free content on there, a whole bunch of stuff that's really, really good. So definitely check that out. I probably spend the most time on my Instagram, which is also at Alyssa's Yellow House. That's probably the easiest place to reach me if you want to reach out and chat about your space. I would love that. I'm so passionate about this and I love to talk about it. I also have a Facebook group, which is also at Alyssa's Yellow House. And the Facebook group is more recent. I haven't had it as long, but it's just kind of a place for conversations about, your space, and kind of just a very welcoming place for sharing the struggles and the successes of living in a space with all of our stuff and all of our people.
Yeah, I love that. So I would encourage listeners to really reach out for a little bit more support, especially in a kind of a private Facebook group like that. That might be a really great place to connect and get a little bit more support. So I will be sure to put all those links in the show notes for people so they can reach out and connect. And I just want to thank you for coming in today and sharing your knowledge and your expertise and your insights. It's been a really helpful conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. And I also have one of the things that I have on my website is I have a workbook that goes through the mindset, the organization, and the methods piece specifically for the kitchen. And I chose the kitchen because it tends to be one of the most stressful rooms in the house. If you think about it, it's one of the only rooms in the house where we never, ever go to relax. We're always working when we're in there. And so it just creates the sense of stress. And so I put this workbook together. It's very robust. It's over 100 pages going through It's a lot, and it's very step by step to walk through how to think about it and how to put together a space that just feels good and that really, really functions and works for you and has that supportive relationship on both sides. So if somebody is thinking, yes, I want to dive in, I want to know how to do that, that's a really good resource for them to look into.
Great, great. And honestly, as you're talking, I've got a couple of clients coming to my mind. So it's like, oh my gosh, that would be perfect for them. So I'll be downloading it and I'll be sharing it. So I will definitely make sure that's in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for your time today. You've been a wealth of information, and I really appreciate you and wish you every joy with your organization and spreading the word. It's so important.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
You're welcome. Take care. Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate you and your time. I love to hear from listeners, so connect with me at katechampionauthor.com. Remember to grab your free hiking guide, and please take a quick moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Thanks so much. Take care. Until next time.